1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. Book 2, Chapter 4. Tango. It might be better not to wish for such a thing. Where is she now? And what could she be doing? Does she still belong to the Society of Witnesses? I sure hope not, Tango thought. Of course, religious faith was a matter of individual freedom. He shouldn't be weighing in on it. But as he recalled, she gave no indication as a young girl that she enjoyed being a believer in the Society of Witnesses. In college, Tango worked part-time in a liquor wholesaler's warehouse. The pay wasn't bad, but moving heavy cases around was hard work, even for the sturdy Tango, whose every joint would ache at the end of the day. By coincidence, two young fellows who had grown up as second-generation members of the Society of Witnesses worked alongside him. Both were polite young men, nice guys. They were the same age as Tango and serious workers. They worked without complaint and without cutting corners. Once, after work, the three of them went to a bar and had a pint of beer together. The two of them had been friends since childhood, they said, but a few years earlier they had abandoned the faith. On separating from the religion, they had set foot in the real world. As far as Tango could see, however, neither of them had fully adapted to their new world. Because they had been raised in a narrow, close-knit community, they found it hard to understand and accept the rules of the broader world. Often, they would lose what confidence they had in their own judgments and end up perplexed. They felt liberated by their abandonment of the faith, but they simultaneously retained a nagging suspicion that their decision had been a mistake. Tango could not help but sympathize with them. If they had separated from that world while they were still children, before their egos had been firmly established, they would have had a much better chance of adapting to the social mainstream. But once they missed that chance, they had no choice but to live in the witness community, conforming with its values. Or else, with considerable sacrifice, and depending entirely on their own strength, they had to remake their customs and attitudes from the ground up. When he spoke with them, Tango would recall the girl and hope that she had not experienced the same pain as these two young men. After the girl finally let go of his hand and dashed out of the classroom without looking back, Tango could only stand there, unable to do a thing. She had gripped his left hand with considerable strength, and a vivid sense of her touch remained in that hand for several days. Even after more time went by and the direct sensation began to fade, his heart retained the deep impressions she had made there. Shortly after that, Tango experienced his first ejaculation. A very small amount of liquid emerged from the tip of his erect penis. It was somewhat thicker than urine and was accompanied by a faintly painful throbbing. Tango did not realize that this was the precursor of full-fledged semen. He had never seen such a thing before, and it worried him. Something scary might be happening to him. It was not something he could discuss with his father, however, nor could he ask his classmates about it. That night, he woke from a dream, the contents of which he could not remember, to find his underpants slightly damp. It seemed to Tango as if, by squeezing his hand, the girl had drawn something out of him. He had no contact with her after that. Aomame maintained the same isolated position in the class, spoke with no one, and recited the usual prayer before lunch in the same clear voice. Even if they happened to pass each other somewhere, her expression exhibited not the slightest change, as if there had been nothing between them, as if she had not even seen Tango. Tango, for his part, took to observing Aomame closely and covertly whenever he had the chance. He realized now, on closer inspection that she had a nice face, nice enough for him to feel he could like her. She was long and thin, and she always wore faded clothing that was too big for her. When she put on gym clothes, he could tell that her chest had not yet begun to develop. Her face displayed virtually no expression. She hardly ever talked, and her eyes, which always seemed to be focused on something far away, had no sign of life in them. Tengo found this strange because on that day when her eyes had looked straight into his, they had been so clear and luminous. After she squeezed his hand like that, Tengo came to see that this skinny little girl was far tougher inside than the average person. Her grip itself was impressive, but it was more than that. She seemed to possess an even greater strength of mind. Ordinarily, she kept this energy hidden where the other students couldn't see it. When the teacher called on her in class, she said no more than minimally necessary to answer the question, and sometimes not even that much. But her posted test scores were never bad. Tengo guessed that she could earn still better grades if she wanted to, but she might be deliberately holding back on exams so as not to attract attention. Perhaps this was the wisdom with which a child in her position survived. By minimizing her wounds, staying as small as possible, as nearly transparent as possible. How great it would be, Tengo thought, if only she were a totally ordinary girl, with whom he could have a light-hearted conversation. Maybe they could have been good friends. For a 10-year-old boy and girl to become good friends was not easy under any circumstances. Indeed, it might be one of the most difficult accomplishments in the world. But while they ought to have managed the occasional friendly chat, such an opportunity never presented itself to Tengo and Aomame. So rather than make the effort to forge a real relationship with the flesh and blood Aomame, Tengo chose to relate to her through the silent realm of imagination and memory. The 10-year-old Tengo had no concrete image of sex. All he wanted from the girl was for her to hold his hand again, if possible. He wanted her to squeeze his hand again someplace where the two of them could be alone. And he wanted her to tell him something, anything, about herself, to whisper some secret about what it meant to be Aomame, what it meant to be a 10-year-old girl. He would try hard to understand it, and that would be the beginning of something, though even now Tengo still had no idea what that something might be. April came, and the new school year began. Now they were 5th graders, but Tengo and the girl were put into separate classes. Sometimes they would pass each other in the hall, or wait at the same bus stop, but the girl continued to act as if she were unaware of Tengo's existence, or at least it appeared that way to Tengo. He could be right next to her and she wouldn't move an eyebrow. She wouldn't even bother to look away from him. As before, all depth and brightness were gone from her eyes. Tengo wondered what that incident in the classroom could have meant. Often it seemed to him like something that had happened in a dream, and yet his hand still retained the vivid feel of Aomame's extraordinary grip. This world was far too full of riddles for Tengo. Then, at some point, he realized that the girl named Aomame was no longer in school. She had transferred to another school, but that was all he found out. No one knew where she had moved to. He was probably the only one in the entire elementary school even slightly bothered by the fact that she had ceased to exist among them. For a very long time after that, Tengo continued to regret his actions, or more precisely, his lack of action. Now, finally, he could think of the words that he should have spoken to her. Inside him, at last, were the things that he wanted to tell her, the things he should have told her. It would not have been so hard. He should have stopped her on the street and said something. If only he had found a good opportunity and whipped up a tiny bit of courage. But that had been impossible for Tengo, and now the chance was lost forever. Tengo often thought about Aomame after he graduated from the elementary school and advanced to a public middle school. He started having erections more often and masturbated while thinking of her. He always used his left hand, the hand that retained the touch of her grasp. In his memory, Aomame remained a skinny little girl without breasts, but he was able to bring himself to ejaculate with the thought of her in gym clothes. In high school, he started dating girls his own age. Their brand new breasts showed clearly through their clothes, and the sight made it hard for Tengo to breathe. But even so, in bed, before he fell asleep at night, Tengo would move his left hand while thinking of Aomame's flat chest, which lacked even a hint of swelling. There must be something wrong with him, something perverted, Tengo thought. Once he entered college, though, Tengo no longer thought about Aomame all the time. The main reason for this was he started dating real women, actually having sex with some of them. Physically, at least, he was a mature man, for whom the image of a skinny little 10-year-old girl in gym clothes had, naturally enough, grown removed from the object of his desire. Still, Tengo never again experienced the same intense shuddering of the heart that he had felt when Aomame gripped his hand in the elementary school classroom. None of the women he met in college or after leaving college to the present day made as distinct an impression on his heart as Aomame. He could not find what he was really looking for in any of them. There had been beautiful ones and warm-hearted ones, and ones who truly cared for him, but they had come and gone, like vividly colored birds perching momentarily on a branch before flying off somewhere. They could not satisfy him, and he could not satisfy them. Even now, on the verge of turning 30, Tengo was surprised to find his thoughts drifting back to the 10-year-old Aomame. There she was, in the deserted classroom, staring straight at him with her crystal-clear eyes, her hand tightly gripping his. Sometimes her skinny frame was draped in gym clothes, or she was walking behind her mother down the Ichikawa shopping mall on a Sunday morning, her lips clamped shut, her eyes staring at a place that was no place. At such times, Tengo would think, I guess I'll never be able to detach myself from her. And he would kick himself again, now that it was too late, for never having spoken to her in the hallway. If only I had made myself do it. If only I had said something to her, my life might be very different. What reminded him of Aomame was buying edamame in the supermarket. He was choosing among the branches of fresh edamame in the refrigerator case when the thought of Aomame came to him quite naturally. Before he knew it, he was standing there, lost in a daydream. How long this went on he had no idea, but a woman's voice saying, "Excuse me," brought him back. He was blocking access to the edamame section with his large frame. He stopped daydreaming, apologized to the woman, dropped the edamame branch into his shopping basket, and brought it to the cashier along with his other groceries, shrimp, milk, tofu, lettuce, and crackers. There he waited in line with the housewives of the neighborhood. It was the crowded evening shopping hour, and the cashier was a slow-moving trainee, which made for a long line, but this didn't bother Tengo. Assuming she was in this line at the cash register, would I know it was Aomame just by looking at her? I wonder. We haven't seen each other in 20 years. The possibility of our recognizing each other must be pretty slim. Or say, we pass on the street and I think, could that be Aomame? Would I be able to call out to her on the spot? I can't be sure of that either. I might just lose heart and let her go without doing a thing. And then I'd be filled with regret again. Why couldn't I have said something to her? Just one word. Komatsu often said to Tengo, "What's missing in you is desire and a positive attitude." And maybe he was right. When Tengo had trouble making up his mind, he would think, "Oh well," and resign himself. That was his nature. But if by chance we were to come face to face and were fortunate enough to recognize each other, I would probably open up and tell her everything honestly. We'd go into some nearby cafe, assuming she had the time and accepted my invitation, and sit across from each other, drinking something while I told her everything. And there were so many things he wanted to tell her. I still remember when you squeezed my hand in that classroom. After that, I wanted to be your friend. I wanted to get to know you better. But I just couldn't do it. There were lots of reasons for that, but the main problem was that I was a coward. I regretted it for years. I still regret it. And I think of you all the time. Of course, he would not tell her that he had masturbated while picturing her. That would be in a whole different dimension than sheer honesty. It might be better not to wish for such a thing, though. It might be better never to see her again. I might be disappointed if I actually met her, Tengo thought. Maybe she had turned into some boring, tired-looking office worker. Maybe she had become a frustrated mother, shrieking at her kids. Maybe the two of them would have nothing in common to talk about. Yes, that was a very real possibility. Then Tengo would lose something precious that he had cherished all these years. It would be gone forever. But no, Tengo felt almost certain it wouldn't be like that. In that 10-year-old girl's resolute eyes and strong-willed profile, he had discovered a decisiveness that time could not have worn down. By comparison, what about Tengo himself? Such thoughts made him uneasy. Wasn't Aomame the one who would be disappointed if they met again? In elementary school, Tengo had been recognized by everyone as a math prodigy and received the top grades in almost every subject. He was also an outstanding athlete. Even the teachers treated him with respect and expected great things from him in the future. Aomame might have idolized him. Now, though, he was just a part-time cram school instructor. True, it was an easy job that put no constraints on his solitary lifestyle, but he was far from being a pillar of society. While teaching at the cram school, he wrote fiction on the side, but he was still unpublished. For extra income, he wrote a made-up astrology column for a women's magazine. It was popular, but it was, quite simply, a pack of lies. He had no friends worth mentioning, nor anyone he was in love with. His weekly trysts with a married woman 10 years his senior were virtually his sole human contact. So far, the only accomplishment of which he could be proud was his role as the ghostwriter who turned Air Crystallis into a bestseller, but that was something he could never mention to anyone. Tengo's thoughts had reached this point when the cashier picked up his grocery basket. He went back to his apartment with a bag of groceries in his arms. Changing into shorts, he took a cold can of beer from the refrigerator and drank it, standing while he heated a large pot of water. Before the water boiled, he stripped all the leathery edamame pods from the branch, spread them on a cutting board, and rubbed them all over with salt. When the water boiled, he threw them into the pot. Tengo wondered, why has that skinny little 10-year-old girl stayed in my heart all these years? She came over to me after class and squeezed my hand without saying a word. That was all. But in that time, Aomame seemed to have taken part of him with her, part of his heart or body, and in its place she had left part of her heart or body inside him. This important exchange had taken place in a matter of seconds. Tengo chopped a lot of ginger to a fine consistency. Then he sliced some celery and mushrooms into nice-sized pieces. The Chinese parsley, too, he chopped up finely. He peeled the shrimp and washed them at the sink. Spreading a paper towel, he laid the shrimp out in neat rows like troops in formation. When the edamame were finished boiling, he drained them in a colander and left them to cool. Next, he warmed a large frying pan and dribbled in some sesame oil and spread it over the bottom. He slowly fried the chopped ginger over a low flame. I wish I could meet our Mame right now, Tengo started thinking again. Even if she turned out to be disappointed in him, or he was a little disappointed in her, he didn't care. He wanted to see her in any case. All he wanted was to find out what kind of life she had led since then, what kind of place she was in now, what kind of things gave her joy, what kinds of things made her sad. No matter how much the two of them had changed, or whether all possibility of their getting together had already been lost, this in no way altered the fact that they had exchanged something important in that empty elementary school classroom so long ago. He put the sliced celery and mushrooms into the frying pan, turning the gas flame up to high and lightly jogging the pan. He carefully stirred the contents with a bamboo spatula, adding a sprinkle of salt and pepper. When the vegetables were just beginning to cook, he tossed the drained shrimp into the pan. After adding another dose of salt and pepper to the whole thing, he poured in a small glass of sake, then a dash of soy sauce, and finally a scattering of Chinese parsley. Tengo performed all these operations on automatic pilot. This was not a dish that required complicated procedures. His hands moved on their own with precision, but his mind stayed focused on our Mame the whole time. When the stir-fried shrimp and vegetables were ready, Tengo transferred the food from the frying pan to a large platter along with the edamame. He took a fresh beer from the refrigerator, sat at the kitchen table and, still lost in thought, proceeded to eat the steaming food. I'm obviously been changing a lot over the past several months. Maybe you could say I'm growing up mentally and emotionally. At last. On the verge of turning 30. Well, isn't that something? With his partially drunk beer in hand, Tengo shook his head in self-derision. Really, isn't that something? How many years will it take me to reach full maturity at this rate? In any case, though, it seemed clear that Air Crystallis had been the catalyst for the changes going on inside him. The act of rewriting fuka-eri's story in his own words had produced in Tengo a strong new desire to give literary form to the story inside himself. And part of that strong new desire was a need for our Mame. Something was making him think about our Mame all the time now. At every opportunity, his thoughts would be drawn back to that classroom on an afternoon 20 years earlier, the way a strong riptide could sweep the feet out from under a person standing on the shore. Tengo drank only half his beer and ate only half his shrimp and vegetables. He poured the leftover beer into the sink, and the food he transferred to a small plate, covered it with plastic wrap, and put it in the refrigerator. After the meal, Tengo sat at his desk, switched on his word processor, and opened his partially written document. True, rewriting the past probably had almost no meaning, Tengo felt. His older girlfriend had been right about that. No matter how passionately or minutely he might attempt to rewrite the past, the present circumstances in which he found himself would remain generally unchanged. Time had the power to cancel all things wrought by human artifice, overwriting all new revisions with further revisions, returning the flow to its original course. A few minor facts might be changed, but tango would still be tango. What tango would have to do, it seemed, was take a hard, honest look at the past while standing at the crossroads of the present. Then he could create a future as though he were rewriting the past. It was the only way. Contrition and repentance. Tear the sinful heart in two. Oh, that my teardrops may be a sweet balm unto thee, faithful Jesus. This was the meaning of the aria from the St. Matthew's Passion that fuka-eri had sung the other day. He had wondered about it and listened again to his recording at home, looking up the words in translation. It was an aria near the beginning of the Passion, concerned with the so-called anointing in Bethany. When Jesus visits the home of a leper in the town of Bethany, a woman pours very costly, fragrant oil on his head. The disciples around him scold her for wasting the precious ointment, saying that she could have sold it and used the money to help the poor. But Jesus quiets the angry disciples and says that the woman has done a good deed. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial. The woman knew that Jesus would have to die soon, and so, as though bathing him in her tears, she could do no less than pour the valuable fragrant oil on his head. Jesus also knew that he would soon have to tread the road to death, and he told the disciples, "Wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her." None of them, of course, was able to change the future. Tango closed his eyes again, took a deep breath, found the words he needed and set them in a row. Then he rearranged them to give the image greater clarity and precision. Finally, he improved the rhythm. Like Vladimir Horowitz seated before 88 brand new keys, Tango curved his 10 fingers suspended in space. Then, when he was ready, he began typing characters to fill the word processor's screen. He depicted a world in which 2 moons hung side by side in the evening eastern sky, the people living in that world and the time flowing through it. Wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her. End of chapter.